All right, welcome to another episode of Love, Hope, Lyme, the podcast. My name is Fred Diamond. I'm the author of Love, Hope, Lyme, What Family Members, Partners, and Friends who love a chronic Lyme survivor need to know. And of course, I'm the host of this podcast, the Love, Hope, Lyme podcast. You can find this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, etc. You can go to freddiamond.com and click on the big button that says Love, Hope, Lyme to find all the back episodes and also to read all the transcripts. We transcribe every episode that we've done. We post the show every 2 weeks. Hey, you can find my book, Love, Hope, Lyme, on Amazon. Greg, I've made the e-version of the book free for chronic Lyme survivors. You can reach out to me via Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Reddit for that matter. Actually, you're probably not going to understand who I am on Reddit. And I will very happily send you a PDF copy of the book, sent to Greg to over 1,000 people. So when I wrote the book, I met some amazing leaders in the Lyme community, doctors, medical practitioners. I started my journey, Greg, in June of 2021 to understand how chronic Lyme was affecting somebody in my life that I loved. I've met so many doctors, medical practitioners, charity directors. You actually run a small charity as well. And they helped me to understand what living with Lyme is all about. So on the podcast, I've invited you and others to share your insights into how that those who love a chronic Lyme survivor can better support this person that they love. If you're a chronic Lyme survivor, a lot of people have reached out to me and said the podcast has helped them understand how they can let their family and friends support you, how you needed to be, or how you need to be supported. I'm excited today. My guest is Gregg Kirk. He's the author of the Gratitude Curve. And in the summer of 2021, when I first began my journey to learn more about Lyme, I read every book. I went to Amazon, I downloaded or purchased every book with the word Lyme in it. And there's a lot of medical books, and there's a bunch of first-person books, people talking about their battle to get Lyme diagnosed and then how they've treated their Lyme. And I came across Gregg's book, The Gratitude Curve. And Greg, I'm pretty sure you recall this. I actually reached out to you and I said, can we talk? And you were very kind. It was a middle of the week, midday in the summer of 2021. And you just were very generous in sharing with me your journey. Of course, I had read the book, which led to a lot of questions. I discovered also, you and I had some kind of sort of history together. I'm from Philadelphia. And after college, I moved back to Philly from 84 to 87. And I know you moved down a little bit later, but you were also in the Philly area. You were a musician. You were the lead guitar player for a band called Robert Hazard and the Heroes, which was a band that I grew up with in Philly. They were Robert Hazard wrote a couple of great hits. May he rest in peace. And you also published a magazine based out of, I believe it was Wilmington, that also covered a lot of the scene in Philly. I actually left Philly in 88, but then discovered as we became friends, a lot of what you had going on in Philadelphia. So we're talking about the 6 stages of healing. And before I get to you, I just want to put this in a little bit of context. In my book, Love, Hope, Lyme, you're covered twice, actually. I interviewed you on my Sales Game Changers podcast. I did an episode after I met some people who had kind of gotten over to a good stage of where your Lyme was in deep remission and you were operating. And we talked about having a mission-driven life, which is so important, I believe, to have a successful career in sales. And that was a great episode that was very important to me in the Sales Game Changers podcast. And we're talking today about healing. I added some of the transcript to the book, Love, Hope, Lyme, but I also devoted a complete chapter to the 6-stage healing process that you've written about. And you were very generous in allowing me to repurpose a lot of that for the book, Hope Lyme. I Love, Hope, Lyme. So give us a little bit of an introduction on how you got to writing the book and how you got to writing that article. And then let's go through the 6 stages.
Yeah, well, quickly, I my own journey of Lyme disease healing lasted about 12 years. And I started feeling better around 2014, 2015, after doing a number of things, a lot of them outside the traditional, Western medicine healing. I went down to Brazil to, try some alternative healing down there. And I got better and I used herbals and so forth. At the end of that situation, I had seen the 6 stages of grief written by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross all the way back in her book, Death and Dying, back in the late 60s. And I thought, hey, at that point, I had talked to hundreds. Now I've talked to thousands of Lyme patients because I run a nonprofit. I also run a clinic. I'm a health coach, so I talk to them every day. There's commonalities in this healing journey. It's an overused cliche, but let's face it, it is more like a journey than anything else. Not everybody starts in the same place. Not everybody ends in the same place, but there's a lot of commonality. So, there were 6 stages that I identified: discovery, disillusionment, treatment, anger and panic, acceptance, and gratitude. Some of them are similar to, the stages of grief, but I would say the last one, gratitude, is what also ultimately inspired my book, The Gratitude Curve, which ultimately is, if you make it through all of these stages, not necessarily, linearly, but if you come out the other end and you're actually grateful for your rough experience because it changed you as a person in a positive way, then, you're in a much better place. Now, somebody in the early stages who hears, oh, you're going to be grateful for the horrible things you're going through now, that might make you angry. And guess what? There's a stage for anger and panic. So you got to get through that one. So I wrote that in 2017, added that as a chapter in my book. You read it, 5 years later. And by the way, I just want to say thank you. You're the only person I know in the Lyme community out of thousands of people who does not have Lyme and who is being so supportive. You were like the unicorn in the Lyme world. So God bless. Thank you for everything you're doing. Shining a light, an impartial light, because you haven't been through, you're not jaded by the experience. You're looking at it from the outside, which is very uncommon. So God bless for what you're doing, and thank you so much. But yes, you got in touch. We got in touch. I was honored that you asked to use, a big chunk of what ultimately was the blog post that I did all the way back in 2017. So yeah, the first stage is discovery. So finding out, that you have Lyme disease. So for me, that took 2 years, which may sound like a lot to somebody outside the Lyme community. It's actually not very long. I talked to patients who have been undiagnosed for decades because Lyme disease imitates 300 different illnesses. The blood tests are as high as 60% inaccurate. So false negatives are very common. So it's very common in the Lyme world to wonder what the heck's going on with you. And that's what happened with me. So I thought I had all kinds of different things. And then unfortunately, a lot of the doctors, this is a common thing where if you don't have cancer or diabetes or heart disease or something like that, they'll say, are you depressed? So immediately it goes into this weird gaslighting situation like, hey, maybe you're crazy. They did that with me. And I said, listen, I know I'm not crazy. I have these feelings and I have these symptoms. So anyway, once you can get out of the discovery phase, you tend to go into this next phase. They tend to go hand in hand, which is disillusionment. Sounds like, a not so pretty phase, and it isn't, but it's actually important for the Lyme patient to understand that these doctors that you've gone to your whole life, that you trust and know about a lot of different things, know nothing about Lyme disease. In fact, they're actually trained against it. So rheumatologists and infectious disease doctors in particular are trained to not believe in something called chronic Lyme disease. So that's when you've had it for a long time. They'll just treat your symptoms and you'll just stay on symptom treatment for the rest of your life and never get better.
Yeah, actually, it's just a couple quick things. One is, most doctors are trained in what they know. So if it isn't what they know, then, they can just discard it or say, well, the blood test doesn't show anything. And, like we talked, or we'll talk about, a lot of the Lyme tests aren't particularly accurate. We haven't gotten there yet where there's great Lyme tests. So I've heard so many situations where someone's gone through 10, 15 doctors. And like you just said, the very last one is, well, we've tested for everything. And there's, we don't know, nothing seems to be showing up. So it's probably in your head. So, and then they're discarded. And, I've especially if you're a woman, that gets thrown about, and it's a very, very difficult place to be. But I want people to know, when we cover this in the book, Love, Hope, Lyme, is that, there's something real, there's something real. So the other thing I want to talk about real briefly is, the word healing. And the reason why I included this in the book, I've never really had, and thank you very much for your nice comments about me before. I've never really had a serious illness. So I've never really thought much about the word heal, right? And then when I decided I needed to learn more about this particular disease, I would jump up on Facebook groups or Instagram or Twitter, and I would see people talk about heal all the time. And like every other word was heal. What treatment do I need to heal? And what's my life? What was your process to healing? That's why I felt it was so important to put it into the book, to go through those stages so that the people who love the Lyme survivors understand. So stage 3, what do we get to in stage 3?
Well, ultimately, if you can get a good diagnosis, and in my situation, I thought, oh, thank God, at least I know I have Lyme disease. I live in a state where, a lot of people have it. So I'll get the best treatment. And, I just started getting antibiotics and other pharmaceuticals to manage the symptoms. And after a while, I started going down a bad downward spiral of my symptoms got worse. They didn't get better. And then the doctor said, well, you're having what's called a Herxheimer reaction. And that's a symptom of toxins being built up because you're killing these pathogens and they're releasing toxins. So tough it out, which was a shocking thing to hear. And especially when I think back nowadays, like none of my doctors said, hey, have you considered doing a little bit of detoxing and maybe backing off of your treatment if it's too hard for you? They were just like, plow ahead. So here's the thing about treatment. It's as unique as your fingerprints. What works for somebody will not work for somebody else. I had to learn this myself. So I went through a certain set of steps that worked for me. And I thought, that's going to work for everybody. It does not. So finding the right treatment is 50% of it is you. Okay. So relying 100% on your doctors, that's putting all of your sovereignty and your trust in somebody who's not really dedicated to knowing about what's going on with you. You're in your body. You're the number one authority about what's best for you and what's going on. So it really is 50% of your responsibility. I know that's may be a tough thing to hear for some patients who are like, oh my God, I'm so tired. I'm going through this. I just want to take these pills and get over it. Well, that's the thing about the disease. It does something to you where you gotta, it can take you up or it can take you down. It can make you bitter. It can make you better. If you take on the responsibility of your illness, you become more self-empowered. You don't need the doctors as much. Great to listen to them, but you're starting to find out in your own body, hey, this worked for me last week. This doesn't work for me. I'm going to stick with the things that work and stick with them and keep moving. And I hear what my doctors are saying, but a lot of times what they're saying is not what I'm experiencing. They're predicting these medicines are going to work and they don't. So I also found out, in the Lyme groups that there's these certain sets of herbals that work really well. So maybe I give those a try, nice and light, nothing crazy, and then see how you do. So the treatment, again, is very customized. Later on, I wrote a blog post about, that Lyme disease is a custom illness. No one size fits all. So very important to understand that. So while you're in the treatment phase, you're going to have some emotional reactions, which brings us to the next stage, which is anger and panic. Some people call this fight or flight. Common to get in this situation. It's normal, but the quicker you can get out of this one, the better. Because when you're in fight or flight, your autonomic nervous system is firing. People don't sleep well during this system. It's almost impossible to heal when you're in this constant state of anger and panic. You physically, your adrenaline and cortisol are firing throughout your body. You don't feel well. And you get mad at people a lot. You drive the people away who are trying to support you. I did that, or you turn it inward and want to commit suicide, which, according to some doctors, that's the number one cause of death right now is suicide. So we don't want to stay in this. So what did I do? I noticed one day we were talking about, I was recently on a podcast with a famous comedian. My wife and I were watching this famous comedian when I was in the midst of my illness. That's so sick. And we watched the stand-up comedian, an hour-long thing. When it was over, I turned to my wife, who threw her back out, by the way. She laughed. She got injured from laughing so hard. I told her, hey, I laughed so hard, I forgot I was sick. And I just said that in an offhand way. An hour or two later, I thought, wait a minute, that was real. My body turned off all the cortisol or whatever was going on. Yeah. I felt normal. I had no symptoms the entire hour. So that was like a huge wake-up call to me that, wait a minute, what if I work on this stuff, like listen to music that makes me feel great, watch a lot of comedians when I don't feel great, and change my body chemistry with these tools as well. We have these at our disposal. That helped me turn the corner on anger and panic. So
yeah, it's very interesting in a couple different ways. One is obviously every stage, of course, gratitude is a great stage, but one of the challenges with Lyme that I had seen by meeting so many people, and I've added close to 2,000 Facebook friends, and I get 3-4 people a day who reach out to me from the business world. My wife's sister-in-law has Lyme, and this book has helped us understand what they're going through. But one of the big challenges is, as we get through the stages, like you mentioned before, there's no pill, right? You go up on the various Lyme Facebook groups and you see people, some people promoting silver bullet type cures, urine therapy, a certain drug that is used to treat parasites in horses, which some people swear by. And then there's people who just say, I did this and this saved my life type of a thing. And the reason I'm bringing this up right now is that for the people
and those people aren't lying. If they got better, it's worked for them. Does it mean it'll work for you?
The challenge is in stage 4, the anger stage, is that you're trying all these things. You go up on the Facebook groups, or you're doing all your research because your doctors, there are a lot of great doctors, but you're absolutely right. It's your body. You're going through this 7/24, not every 2 weeks or every month when you see your doctor, or via telemedicine for 45 minutes, when he checks the charts. So one of the big problems is the anxiety. I've done this, it didn't work. I did this, it didn't work. I did this, it didn't work. I want people to know, who are on the family member, partner, and friend side, that is real. And unfortunately, there's nothing you could really do in that stage as your loved one is going through that. And I can firsthand state to that. So it's a really difficult, out of all the stages, they're all difficult, but that's probably one of the most difficult. I want to ask you a question too. You mentioned you run a clinic. You had some pretty incredible things happen to you. You were invited to learn intimately some of the treatments of Lyme, which led you to this. So talk about that for a second before we get to stage 5.
Yeah, it was amazing. So, I got better through some things that I did. And like an idiot, a good, well-meaning idiot, I thought, hey, this worked for me. It's going to work for everybody. And it worked for a lot of people, but some people didn't work for. Anyway, during this, I set up the nonprofit. The nonprofit is called Ticked Off Foundation, and we help patients stay on treatment. We are a patient support program. We're not like any of the others. We do it in a very specific way. We literally sit down with each patient for an hour and find out what's going on with them and give them some options on how we can best help them. So it's not a straight line, like we're just throwing money at you or anything like that. We literally sit down with you and find out what your pain point is and try to help with that. So we started that, and during me starting this up, I reached out to the company that made the herbal protocol that really helped me. Should I mention it, or does it matter? Okay, so it was Nutrimetics, because I did the Cowden protocol. It's an herbal protocol. It's works very well. Does it work for everybody? It's got about an 80 to 85% recovery rate. So there's a window there of like 10 to 15% of the people who can't tolerate it because they have other issues, detox problems, genetic issues, and so forth. Fine. Anyway, setting this up, I reached out to them and talked to the CEO and said, hey, would you like to be a sponsor of what I'm doing? Because you guys are great. And he said, no, you're a nonprofit, we're for profit. That's too sticky. He said, but how about this? How would you like to be trained by Dr. Cowden? And what? And I kept putting him off. I said, oh, come on, let's get this relationship going, blah, blah, blah. And he just made me an offer I couldn't refuse. He said, we'll pay for your travel. You go to Harrisburg. It's you and 15 doctors. And I'm like, how can I say no to this? So I didn't. I went, got trained by Dr. Cowden, who is a phenomenal person. And he's developed a really great protocol, but as a person, he's a very intuitive, what you would call a medical intuitive. So it was fascinating to spend the weekend with him, have dinner with him, all that stuff. So that was great. So after I went away from that and started the the foundation, what I offer as for free is free treatment guidance with that protocol in particular. And then afterwards, patients were saying to me, hey, why don't you open a clinic where you live and actually charge as a health coach? So I thought, okay, let me try that too. So it's a separate thing. It's a for-profit business, but it's, my Lyme literate doctors charged me $1,000 or even more per visit, and insurance didn't cover it. And I fully get how hard that was. That ruined my bank account. So my rates are $100 for a consult, and the treatment is always discounted. So it's much more patient friendly. So thank you for bringing that. That's the clinic's called LymeRecoveryClinic.com. So check it out if you're interested. But it's for people who are ready to heal, curious about alternative medicines. Maybe you've gone through these stages and you're ready for a new treatment. I'd love to talk to you.
All right, so now we're at stage 5. So this is a very important stage.
Yeah. So acceptance. So, you've gone through everything. This is the stage usually that follows anger and panic or fight or flight. It's where you're like, okay, I've been pissed off for a long time. That's not working for me. I've driven my family members away, or I can't go through life wanting to kill myself every day. In my situation, it wasn't that I wanted to kill myself. I just didn't want to live. I wasn't going to do anything about it, but I thought, hey, if I walk out in the street one day and a bus hits me, then hey, that all right. It wasn't so bad, because I couldn't imagine living life in that much pain and brain fog. And it was just awful. I felt like a zombie. So accepting where you are and then moving beyond it, with some of the ways that I talked about earlier, finding out some things that give you joy in your life, that take, the foot off of your neck of the Lyme disease, of the symptoms. So there's a really great doctor in Seattle named Dr. Klinghardt, Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt. He has, he told some patients, I found this out through patients who were working with him, where they said, Dr. Klinghardt says that the Lyme disease, there's something unusual about it. It likes it when you pay attention to it. So there's almost like an energetic, emotional situation where the more you're bummed out by the Lyme disease, the more you wake up in the morning and notice your symptoms and really talk about them and call them my symptoms and my disease and blah, blah, blah. The Lyme disease likes it. He said the best thing you could do is ignore the Lyme disease, ignore your symptoms. And I know that may sound a bit crazy, but if it sounds crazy, then maybe you're in this of, paying all this attention, to your symptoms and how bad you feel and calling it yours. But try something different. Try the opposite. Forget about it. Take your treatment, keep doing what you're doing, kind of start looking to rejoining your life. That's what I did. So there was a day when finally I just was paying more attention to my life and less attention to the disease. And that's when that's when shifts started to happen in my body. Treatment started to work better. And that's when the gratitude started coming in. So people ask me like, well, how did you know when to stop taking the treatment? And I'll tell you, I forgot to take it. There was one day I was so involved with my life that, if you're sitting in a hole and you're looking around at the walls of the hole, you're going to think you're never going to get out. But I started looking out of the hole of, what am I going to do next week? Not related to Lyme disease, about my life. What am I going to do? Who am I going to hang out with? What are some projects I can get involved with? Ignoring the illness, continuing to take treatment, watching comedy shows, listening to great music. This is how I started to get out of the hole. And then finally, I was all the way out of the hole. And for 2 or 3 days, I forgot to take the treatment. And I thought, oh my God, I didn't die. I didn't have a relapse. I stopped taking the treatment. And then I thought, oh my God, I'm better. I'm so grateful. And so, here's just the bottom line here. During this whole process, I was grieving my old life, so you want to talk about stages of grief. It ultimately comes into that. You have a life, that is completely destroyed by this illness by the time you're done. And I hung on to that. I was grieving my life. I thought, I really love my life. But, this is the line I use in my book. I said, this disease is like a forest fire. It burnt my life to the ground. But forest fires are actually good for a forest. It burns away the dead wood and leaves you room for new growth. So it burnt my life to the ground. Yes. Did I like it? No. It made me feel horrible. But once I just accepted that happened, I realized I have a new life, and I do. I have a better life than I had before Lyme disease. So I'm actually grateful for it. And that's
Wow.
the truth.
That is extremely powerful. And, for people listening, for those who love a chronic Lyme survivor, this is the journey that I have heard so many times that people are going through. Now, I hope that the people that you love get to stage 5 and stage 6, but here's a little bit of a warning for you who love a chronic Lyme survivor, friends, partners. It's their journey to get cured. Like you just said, it was your personal journey. And I know you have family around you, but it may require them doing things that you would prefer that they don't do. But at the same time, if you love somebody in this stage, then you need to allow them to get there so that they can have a loving and fulfilling life. Gregg Kirk, thank you so much. You've done a lot of great things with the clinic, with your not-for-profit. You do concerts. You're just an amazing musician. I mean, when I heard you play a little bit, and I said, "Whoa, this guy's really good." And then when I found out about all the Robert Hazard stuff and all the stuff you did in Philly, I encourage people to look you up. Do you still perform around? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So after all this, I started a side musical project called The Zen Engine. So if you want to check that out, it's called thezenengines.com. All the music is written about, the Lyme disease, everything we just talked about. So all of it is informed. And I've been able to collaborate with some amazing people and co-write some Lyme uplifting songs with some other Lyme patients, and Les Stroud, who's Survivor Man. He used to do the Survivor Man TV series. And so check that out. And yes, so I do concerts every now and then. After COVID hit, we stopped doing them in public, but we started doing these Zoom concerts at ticktoffmusicfest.com. So check those out. So every year I'll do, just like a private, concert that's broadcast of the music that I'm talking about. So, thank you. I'm glad you watched it and you enjoyed it. And it's a lot of fun to play it. So we're looking to do some other concerts now that, things are opening up more. So, keep an eye on that as well. Thank you, Fred.
You're welcome. Once again, the book is The Gratitude Curve with Gregg Kirk. My name is Fred Diamond. There it is. My name is Fred Diamond. This is the Love, Hope, Lyme podcast.